All right, I'm going to run through the last two headings here, which would include the economy and society of the early Islamic world, as well as the Islamic values and cultural exchanges. So the things that you will be really wanting to focus on that College Board could ask you about in May include Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and the core beliefs and practices of these religions continue to shape societies in Africa and Asia. Also, Muslim states and empires encourage significant intellectual innovations and transfers. We'll go through some of them in this chapter. In a future chapter, we'll go through many more of them. So when it comes to the economy of the early Islamic world, it's important to realize that economy was really kind of the lifeblood of it, the engine. I mean, Muhammad himself was a merchant. And so what's going to happen is that we're going to create a bunch of and strengthen the trade routes between all the way from India all the way to Spain. One of the most important crops at this point is going to be cotton that comes under Muslim control. One of the other things is as the Western diet will start to adapt to a wider variety, we're going to take different ideas of how to do agriculture and move them throughout the empire. And these crops will also be adopted for different growing seasons. We're going to see a strengthening of agricultural sciences develop. And as I mentioned before, the cotton industries will be very important, as will the paper industries. The Quran is incredibly important to Muslims. I've heard one religious scholar say that whereas Jesus is the gift of God to Christians, the Quran is seen as the gift of from God to the Muslims. So it's very important that they're able to reproduce the Quran and people can read it. And we'll also see, as the economy and as these trade routes strengthen, we see more and more major cities emerge. This creates this hemispheric trading zone, which is actually just building off of the precedent of the previous Arabic trade routes, which unfortunately we don't get to really study. The Dar al-Islam really encompasses some very key strategic parts of all the Silk Roads, and they're going to be incredibly efficient. We're going to get to the point where ice can literally be exported from Syria down to Egypt in the summer during the 10th century. Another thing that makes this work so well will be camel caravans. Camels are incredible, it's called beasts of burden. They're able to carry very heavy things very long distances, not very quick, but very constant. And the other thing that's going to help with mass trade is going to be maritime trade. And so if I have something heavy, I need to send far distances, I would probably use a camel. If I can't use a camel, then I'm going to use ships to move as much of my goods as I can. As these trade routes strengthen, as the economy explodes, we're going to see banks develop at high rates as well. So we're going to have some of the first checks or socks, so basically a piece of paper which will allow people to collect debts from banks. The other thing that happens is that having the Islamic base is going to be huge throughout Dar al-Islam. It's much easier to trade with people when you know they share the same values, when you have the same rule, while you're playing along the same rules. The other thing that starts to emerge is we're going to have joint ventures are going to be more and more common. So instead of just spending, just as an example, spending $1,000 on one trade route or one trade mission, what you do is you take that $1,000 and you split it up. Okay, and so what happens is you split it up, you start funding smaller parts of many trade routes, and that allows you to get percentages of the profits of all these different shipping adventures that are happening. It's really good to make money. It's also good to diversify. So if something happens, something goes wrong on one trading trip, you're able to still make money in the other ones. So trades can become bigger and safer. The other thing that's very interesting to look at is Al-Andalus, which is basically Muslim Spain. What's going to happen is that the Muslim Berbers are going to be led by some of those Umayyad leaders, and they are going to take Spain in the early 8th century. Eventually, what's going to end up happening is that they are going to break away. They're allied clearly with the Umayyads, but once the Abbasids take over, they're going to break away, and they're going to they're going to form their own caliphate. So again, a caliphate means a caliph or is in charge of it. That obviously is going to cause tensions between the different dynasties, but there's going to be so much money to be made and so much good that come out of it that they'll be able to maintain economic and cultural ties with each other. One of the other real cultural things that's important to note, or I'm sorry, social things we need to note, is the changing status of women. So, again, we need to realize at the start of this, women are going to have very few rights, and so one of the common practices before the Quran and in other places as well um, is going to be the killing of female infants, and so that's called infanticide. So the Quran is going to outlaw that practice. The other thing is it's going to strengthen a woman's position that the brides, not the husbands, are going to be able to claim dowries. They're also going to be given the ability to divorce if necessary. That being said, it is definitely still a patriarchal society. Patrilineal descent will be the rule. So basically, things go to the oldest son. Polygamy will be permitted, and which means multiple wives. Polyandry, multiple husbands, will be forbidden. Women will also have to adopt the veil, which again, that's not necessarily a Muslim practice. It actually was originally in Persia, and actually originally from Mesopotamia, and it's one of the things that some Muslims are going to take on. It's really important to note that you can never just say that, hey, a society was patriarchal, because basically the vast majority of civilization we've ever known has been patriarchal. You would need to say, hey, an example of patriarchy would be the veil, or the example of patriarchy would be polygamy is permitted and polyandry is not. So those are the types of, you need those types of details to be able to get points for things like patriarchy. The other thing that's important to note is that a great Islamic cultural tradition is created. So we're going to have, under Dar al-Islam, there will be a uniformity of Islamic law, and that allows us to create madras, and so basically schools where people are learning the same thing. Again, we've already talked about the ulama and the qadis, which will help to kind of smooth things out. Another thing that's very huge is the importance of the Hajj. So that's usually it's a great trip that someone takes, and can kind of unify them and make them feel like they're part of this huge empire, even though they only live in one place. Another thing that's going to happen, though, is we're going to start to have these missionaries that we call Sufis. These Sufis have a heavy dose of asceticism, which means that they are going to live simply, not to become rich, but just for, living for God, and they're going to be considered mystics. So again, what mystics are is mystics are people who are really more focused on the experience, the ecstatic religious experience, than they are the mental exercise of a religion. So what's going to happen is these Sufi missionaries are going to be rather popular because they don't force you to completely fit in their box of what Islam is. That's going to cause tension, of course, with Orthodox Islamic theologians who feel like things must be one way. But the Sufis are going to be incredibly popular, especially, we'll learn about this later, but especially into the Indian Ocean. These Sufis are going to be very important to spread the ideas of Islam. When it comes to major Sufi thinkers, one of the most important is Al-Ghazali, who is going to live about 1000 CE to 1100 CE. And he is going to be one of the first people to really kind of put this Sufi thinking into real practice and popularity. He's going to make the case that you can't, as a human, you can't intellectually comprehend Allah or God. So what you should do is just show him devotion and focus on mystical ecstasy and instead. So basically having those emotional experiences with them. So again, yeah, that's an idea that we kind of see we can see in some other religions as well, not usually from the conservative people, but from the mystics or liberals. The last things that we're going to go about is just some of the other cultural influences on Islam. So we know Islam is going to influence the areas they go. They're going to be places that they've taken over that are going to influence them back. So we are going to see that in Persia, we've already mentioned the administration and governance from the Achaemenids. Also, the literature tradition, the stories from Persia are going to heavily influence Muslim stories that come after. If you look at the right, you'll see another, which is basically numbers, which come from India. So you already know our numbers that we use, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The numerical symbols of that are actually, they're called Arabic numbers, but they're not actually originally Arabic. They're actually Hindi numbers. They come from India. So we'll be learning later about how India has been a center at different times for mathematics, science, and medicine. And so they are going to influence Muslim culture and the Muslim sciences. And another big influence actually is going to be Greece, is that philosophers, especially Aristotle, are going to have a great influence on some of their thinkers. We didn't get a study about Aristotle, so the short of it is Aristotle was very big on focusing on what you can tangibly argue, like what are the tangible things you can look, you can see, and so on and so forth. And so what's going to happen is that one of the Muslim philosophers, Ibn Rushd, or let's see, Averroes, is going to live from like 1100 to about 1200, and he's going to be one of these people who's going to be influenced by Aristotle to kind of prove Islam through Aristotle's view on philosophy. So how do you prove Islam thinking and the religion is real in the real world, not just in the Quran or inside of a mosque? So as you can see, there's a lot of others we'll get to in future chapters, but Islam as a religion and as a people is really going to blend a lot of different ideas from different places and bring it together and really push our academia and our science and our knowledge on a whole lot of different levels. Okay, thanks for listening.